So going on, we're going to go and take it inside from chapter Dalid, page 7. And we said, V'zeu mashe klipas midyan hu sinas chinam dafka. So how does this project itself inside of the psychology of man? This need to just disconnect and feel separated and quarreling. It shows up as what we call baseless hatred. Shasina einu mitzad eza prat shegarem lo eza ra o shehu menaged lo be'eza prat. Then why do you have baseless hatred? Right, there is such a thing called based hatred, which means, and this is sort of like the 7 nations of Canaan, right? Each one of these nations, which is an attribute in ourselves, they're all negative and like oppose man in some way, right? But there's some kind of a cause behind them. There's something triggering them where the hatred is spawned by some action that was taken against you, right? So even though hatred is still from this other side, and it's never a good thing to have, but sometimes there's a justification for hatred, even though it's a poor justification. You should overcome yourself in love in the place of hate. Nonetheless, there's at least a reason behind it. Somebody did something to you, or somebody triggered you in some way, caused your negativity, whether it be negativity from the side of Chesed or Gevurah, Tiferes, whatever it might be. It caused it to come out because they opposed you in some way. But sinas chinam is baseless hatred, means that you hate as like a starting point. Nobody did anything to you. No one caused you any deep particular evil, right, in any aspect of life. Then the hatred would be based on a particular midah, whether it be chesed or gevurah or tiferes. There's something like driving it. The ein zeh miklipas midyan, right? But that is not the klippa of Midyan. That would be the klippa of the Chiti or the Kanani or the Yevusi, whatever it might be. He says here, for example, the Gevurah of Tohu, right? What is Gevurah of Tohu? A broken, misaligned experience of your midah of Gevurah, right? Which means that you have, let's say, an anger issue or, like an overly disciplined sense of judgment upon yourself or others, right? So this is something that could be caused by something. In other words, somebody does you wrong, somebody, mistreats you. So you have this quality of judgment, which even though you're supposed to keep it in check and overlook it and mavir al midosav, mavir lo donosav, it says someone who overcomes their attributes, Hashem will overcome all your negative, your intentional sins. It's a very high quality to not give in to this judgment. But it could be that somebody wronged you and it elicits from you a negative judgment, which spills over already into the side of not Kedusha. And therefore, you get angry, but it's justified anger. And we said this could be, for example, the midah of Gevurah that broke in the Shviras HaKelim, but it's a particular midah. Shua kas vasina al menagda. This is being angry or hatred on someone who opposes you. Because he opposed you, that's why you have an issue with him. That's why you're arguing with him. That's why you have strife and quarrel. But this type of quarreling that comes from this particular quality of klipas midyan, this unique psychological profile, which we all have at some level, it's not because something happened to you. It's not because something happened that it was triggered. Right? So this is a very crazy thing that, as I said before in the previous classes, people don't realize that they have. That this is a scenario that you simply cannot stand the person, right? His existence bothers you, even though you don't know him at all, and you have no dealings with him at all. It's just like a vibe. People have a lot of names for this thing, right? I don't like this guy's vibe. Well, what did he do to you? Nothing. I just don't like his vibe, right? That is not an answer. What that is like a projection of your own inner evil on somebody else for no reason, right? And not liking somebody's vibe is very, very weak justification for having a rejection of the person. You simply can't unite with the person. You won't come together with him. You just hold yourself apart, like he's not part of your crew. This Right? This is called Sinas Chinam. It's actually just dawned on me the idea of Har Sinai, right? Why is it called Har Sinai? You know? Sinai comes from the word hatred. We call it the mountain of hatred. It's like the mountain of the greatest love and the gift of Torah. Why do we call it Har Sinai? Because it says when the Torah was given, it automatically produced a hatred for us from the non-Jews. Like there's like the built-in hatred that they just can't stand us, right? Why is that? It's not exactly connected over here, but it slightly is. It's because there's a difference between what we call panemius and chitzonius, like the inner dimension of something and the external dimension of something. Whether it's the inner will or the external will, the klippa or the fruit, the shell or the fruit. And the idea is that the external thing is there for the sake of the internal thing. The internal thing is not there for the sake of anything, it's just there for itself. So for example, when it says creation took place, like the word for creation is Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'haaretz. The word Bereshis, Rashi right away tells us it means you break the word down into two parts, right? Base and Reshis. Base means two, and Reshis is a reference to two other things which happen to be called Reshis. So the word Bereshis, which means Hashem created everything, it actually is saying that for the sake of two things which are called Reshis, Hashem created the whole world. What are those two things? The Jewish people and the Torah. First Rashi in the Torah. So it's coming to tell you that the entire creation is external. It's secondary. It's there for something else. Bereshis, for two things. Bara Elokim es hashamayim v'haaretz. Hashem created heavens and earth. So the whole existence does not have an intrinsic reason to be. It's here in order to support, be like a supporting cast and a backdrop and a scene, so that these other two things, which are actually the reason for being, for all existence, which is the Jewish people and the Torah. So for a long time, the Jewish people and the Torah did not emerge into the world. There was 26 generations before God gave us the Torah through Moshe. So up until that time, the world sort of thought that it was the point. And all of a sudden, on Har Sinai comes the Jewish people, and it becomes discovered that actually the whole existence is only there to support our existence. We've got business to do. We've got to elevate sparks. We have to have free choice. We can't do any of these things, put on tefillin and put on tzitzis and build a sukkah unless there's materials. So it became clear that the world is only here as a supporting cast for like the purpose. And the truth is, inside, if you go into the purpose, where the Jewish people and the Torah really reside, there is a place where there is no world, because in a certain sense that's only a supporting element. It doesn't have its own independent existence. And so, in our frame of reference, in our existence, there is a place where the world doesn't exist. As far as the world is concerned, there really is no place where the Jewish people don't exist, because their existence is only there in order to support our existence. So this very concept creates an automatic hatred. Why? Because when you come and tell a person that in where we live, you don't exist, right? Your whole existence is secondary and basically unimportant to a certain degree. It's a supporting cast, whereas in the primary panemius of reality, we're here for intrinsically, for our own like intrinsic worth. You're only here to support. That means they don't really hold a place inside of the true perfect purpose of existence, which means at that place they're not there. There's a place where they don't exist. And when they kind of come and approach us, especially around Har Sinai, when that's like a glaring reality, so it's very uncomfortable to be in the presence of someone who's in their presence. You don't exist, and you're not necessary. And it causes like an unforeseen, they don't even know why. But I mean, it's a matter of fact, right? Throughout the entire history of creation, since Har Sinai, there's an inexplicable, the oldest hatred in the world, anti-Semitism. They don't know why, we don't know why. It's like this bizarre thing that they just can't stand our existence, right? If you look at the whole Arab world, right? It's huge. They've got tons and tons of land. And like when a Yid builds a stone in the middle of some tiny village in Israel, they freak out. They like, you have to die. You have to be gone. There's no other nation on earth today that the mere existence of them is enough to just cause like World War III. Like what did you do wrong? You didn't do anything to us. The fact that you exist in and of itself is like it defies like my understanding of reality, and I can only be okay if you're not here, right? Because and the truth is, in their particular case, they have somewhat justification for that, because where we are, they don't exist, and they want existence. So there's like a necessity for us to be not in existence. Now, it's illogical, because if we were in existence, they wouldn't be in existence either. But they don't realize that. They just know that there's some like prize and panemius place where we are living in, and we're talking about where they are completely non-existent, and they're not the point of the show. And they feel that in some way, right? They like got a memo. They realize that their existence is not primarily important, and therefore they want to obliterate the existence of such a place where they don't matter, right? I'm bringing this whole example out to point out the concept of what it means to be sinas chinam. In other words, there's people in the world where their very presence is enough to all of a sudden just make you feel like that there's something wrong, right? They didn't do anything to you. They're not bothering you. It's just that they hold a coordinates of Dalet Amos in this world, and that's already enough, the very mere fact of their existence, that you have to be opposed to them. You have to get rid of them. There's just something about their very being which is in some way contrary to your being, and they have to go, right? It's completely illogical. It comes from a very dark place in us, as we're going to see. But the point is that it's a real malady, and this is what we mean when we say that the temple is destroyed because of the sin of sinas chinam. It's the inability to accept a person's existence just because they exist. You just can't stand them. Tough call there. Anyway, so this is what we're saying, going back inside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down from the Dalet there. This is what we call baseless hatred. You hate him for free, so to speak. Al lo davar, on nothing that he did to you. Sometimes you'll attach a few type of details to this. You'll come up with some kind of a claim. I don't like his shirt. He doesn't smell good, right? You're going to come up. You'll attach reasons. He says, but the truth is, these types of reasons, when it comes to sinas chinam, they come afterwards. Sometimes there's reasons that comes first. A guy comes and he punches you in the face. Even then, you should control yourself and not hate a person, right? But if you do hate him, it's justified. He did something to you. When the guy walks in and for no reason, you just can't stand his existence, and we'll see really where that stems from, but then you can't live with yourself for just hating a person for no reason. Like you can't look in the mirror and like yourself if you just come to the realization that you just can't stand people for no reason. So what do? You can't stand them for no reason. You make up a reason, right? And that's, I don't like his vibe, right? He just doesn't have a good vibe. You see how he came into the shul wearing that shirt, and I don't know what he was thinking. Like, none of these things matter. If another guy did it, for example, who was a buddy of yours, he wouldn't even give you a second thought. But you need to justify this position that you're just against somebody's existence, and so you come up with quote unquote reasons, but they really come after the fact. I mean, those reasons, those detailed reasons, are not actually the cause of the hatred. In this case, you found some justification in order to justify yourself, only so that when someone says, "Why are you such a hater?" you can justify yourself. You say, "No, it's not for no reason. This guy." Right, and you come up with a litany of responses as to why you can justify such a thing, just so you can make yourself look good in front of someone else, because you can't look at yourself, and no one can look at you if you're walking around with just being a hater. You'll lose all your friends fast. So you come up with reasons why you have an aversion to this person, but really there's not a reason. It's not true. So why do you hate him? Unjustifiably, you just can't stand him. And that's what we were trying to say before from a cosmic perspective. That's why we started this conversation about these higher worlds and the breaking of the sparks, because we asked ourselves in general, where did Klippa come from? Where did the attitude of something opposing God come from in God's green earth? In other words, where did such a thing come from? Hashem actually caused this. And we spoke about yesterday, cosmically, how it like sort of came out that there's something deep inside the godliness itself, which somehow opposes him. And it creates a feeling of separation. We said it was like a strange mechanism whereby when Hashem wants to create finite attributes to describe himself, which is ostensibly a positive thing, but the difficulty is that each one of those finite things, because it's stemming from infinity, each finite thing has an infinite expression, which automatically posits it in conflict with another finite thing, which also has infinite expression. So now there's two or more things. Ultimately, there's like 10 or 7 things that all want to occupy the entire space, all from God's design. Because he wanted to create finite attributes, and yet he was stuck with this problem of being infinite. So the finite attributes are now opposing each other, and this creates this notion of separation. He did it. But when that expresses itself here on earth, it comes out that there's just this feeling of rejection that you're in my space, because there's like a afterglow or some kind of a residue of that cosmic glitch, which then comes and takes a place in our soul, and suddenly we have that same attitude. I'm a finite being who wants to express infinity, and you're in my way. And therefore, I don't need a reason to hate you. Your existence is enough to hate you. You're in my way. If you exist, that means I don't run the whole show. And it's a very, very dark thing. It's from the source of evil itself. And it has a little place in us called the Midian characteristic. And this is, and again, it's very hard to deal with it, even in yourself. Therefore, you try to mask it by coming up with fake reasons why you have this aversion to everybody. But it's not true. You just can't stand everybody. That's it. Vasiba, here he finally gives the real reason, hu hayeshes shalo. The real reason is, in fact, unfortunately, my friends, our own arrogance. As for the reason I just said, really, you have this tinge of this infinite. It's a strange reason to have a corrupted experience. It comes actually from a very high place. There's like a charge of infinity inside of us, and it's actually in the proper context, it's messianic. If you can figure out how to like channel this into the right way, your need to like dominate the whole world is kind of like Moshe Rabbeinu inside of yourself. That's why Moshe actually is the cure for Midian, and Moshe came from Midian, right? And like his whole business was basically like he got married in Midian, and his father-in-law's in Midian. He's a very deep connection with this thing, because if you can get the Midian quality working for you, then what you have is called the powers of Tohu. Like it's an infinite power. The only problem is when you try to manifest it in the wrong way, then you want to be everything and everywhere. It's like the Messiah complex that people have. But on the other hand, the Rebbe himself tells us each one of us has a spark of Mashiach inside of us, and each one is supposed to like dominate the world through their shlichus. So it's a very temperamental thing how to channel this in a healthy way. But when it's unhealthy, it's basically you are the center of the universe. You're the most important person in the world. Everything belongs to you. Every title, every quality, every other person's talents, every other person's stage, every other person's stuff. It's like, really, you're like, why should you have that? I am the center of the universe. And again, because Hashem's infinity was planted somehow inside of us, and we have that experience that we're the center. Hashem makes us feel that way. You are a being where your life to you is the most important thing, and you would kill and be killed, it's like, in order to preserve this sort of centrality of self. You didn't give that to yourself. Hashem planted that inside of you, but it comes with a very, very great sickness. Right? Which is why basically, unfortunately, man is born to die. It's that thing which kills everybody. It's this sort of overinflated sense of self, which ultimately is a cause for jealousy and hatred, and that sickness is what actually causes our demise in the end. Chas v'shalom. And the idea is shehu chashuv be'einei atzmo. You're just extremely important in your own mind. And again, it takes tremendous levels of meditation and real self-work to overcome this, because you're born that way, right? In general, this is just a feeling of self and real and having too much of an experience of your own self-importance. You're aware of yourself in every little aspect of your life, right? Like, in other words, anybody who comes in with some kind of a, quality which you feel like is shiny, they're like a star, it seems like it diminishes your light. You want your star to shine. So if another person comes in and their star is shining, you feel as though that's diminished your own star, and therefore you want to extinguish their star. Like we said before about Har Sinai, right? Our existence as Jews is straight up bothers the existence of everybody else, because the truth is our star shines. We're the panemius, we're the purpose. And when they get a whiff of the fact of like the greatness, their only way of self-preservation is the feeling they have to destroy us. They would be okay if we could just wipe out all the Jews. And that's this crazy motto that they carried through the entire history. Why do they want to have genocide of the Jews in every single generation? Did you ever give any thought to this? I'm sure you have, right? We say in the Haggadah of Pesach, and there's never been a generation that woke up one day and said, you know what, Tati, why are we saying this? This isn't true. We say every generation they stand up to destroy us. Our parents said it. Our grandparents said it, their grandparents said it, and there wasn't one generation that was like, why are we reading this? This is like fiction. Because they all could point to the world and realize that it's happening again. And also we. It's crazy. You ever give any thought to this? They can't stand our existence. We're just trying to take a tiny little piece of the puzzle over here. And what are we going to do? Like cure cancer and like build a big building and offer animal sacrifices? What bothers them already? Right? Our existence bothers them. And unfortunately, we all have a little goy in us, and we all like hate the Jew in us, and we hate the Jew in another person, and we just his existence of like his taking up space is already enough sin for him to need to be wiped out. And the way I wiped him out, I'm not a murderer, so I just hate you, and like with my negative thoughts against you and my negative feelings, I think completely ridiculously, because all it does is hurt me, but I think I'm going to like squash you out of existence by being jealous of you, by hating you, by putting an evil eye on you. This somehow makes me happy. In reality, it doesn't make me happy. It makes me sick. But this is what we do to try to basically preserve our own self-preservation. It's not a pretty picture, I'll be honest with you. Okay. Where are we holding? You guys following all this?
Where are we on the page? We're like the line that starts out of iron.
10 lines up from the bottom.
Okay.
At the period. Therefore, you simply cannot stand the other. And there actually is a reason. We're calling it baseless hatred, but we now have come to the realization that there is a reason. It's a terrible reason, but the reason is your own arrogance. Right? It's not for nothing. It's because of you that you hate the other person. That's a big difference between a regular hatred and this special type of hatred. The other hatreds come because of them. They did something and basically you are responding to them. In this case, you're causing the hatred all by yourself. They didn't have to do anything. Because of their existence and your overinflated self-importance, that's enough for you already to reject them.
Well, then isn't it not sinas chinam?
It's not exactly for no reason. We call it for no reason because the reason is not generated from outside, it's generated from within.
The reason's fake.
Well, the reason's not fake, the reason is just terrible. It's because of your own self. It's because of your own like falsely inflated greatness that this person automatically, so to speak, wronged you. Even though they didn't do it, that's why it's called for no reason, because they didn't do anything to you.
The divisions within the Jewish people, for that we might think that's for a reason. It's really for no reason. I mean, it's somebody is a Chiloni, let's say, then the truth is that that's not a reason to hate.
On the contrary, I mean, you look in the Tanya, you look in the Torah, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, the fact that someone is drowning in a sea, is that a reason to hate them? Right? And this is what, so to speak, called a Chiloni is, right? For sure in our generation, when the Rebbe sort of paskin broadly that anyone who's not keeping Torah mitzvahs is considered that they are called a Tinuk Shenishba. It's not really their fault. They were born into a crazy generation, a post-Holocaust generation. Their parents already threw their tefillin off the boat. They were raised practically in a house of goyim. They don't know what the Torah is. They're drowning, literally, grasping for air, and your response is to hate them? How about lend a hand, right? So yeah, these types of divisions are completely coming from an overinflated sense of self-importance. And he's going to say, unfortunately, soon, the greatest measure of sinas chinam is in the religious world. And the reason is because we're tapped into this inner truth, that the purpose is with us and the Torah mitzvahs. So this is like feeding grounds for your Yetzer Hara to really inflate your self-importance. You know, the word Tanya is, of course, the beginning of a brisa in the Gemara. When you start off with a Tanaic statement, you start off with the word Tanya, but Kabbalistically, do you know what the word Tanya means? It's a particular type of Yetzer Hara. The word Tanya comes from the word Tanin, which means a snake. And it's the snake is like the essence of the Yetzer Hara, right? The Nachash HaKadmoni, the primordial snake, is like literally the physical depiction, and at one point housed the entirety of evil inside of it, and to a certain degree still does. Why does the Tanya start with the word Tanya? So the Alter Rebbe explained that there's a particular type of Yetzer Hara that is found specifically with Torah scholars. The only Torah scholars have this, and it's an arrogance that's forged out of specifically them thinking that they're so great, because they are great. Other people who are sitting around like, scraping money together and cheating people in the marketplace, they can pretend that they've accomplished something with their life. But a Torah scholar who sits and he knows the whole Shas, he's mamash accomplished something with his life. This is a serious guy. But because of that, his feeling of self-importance is out the wazoo, and he is literally the embodiment of the snake. It's worst thing you could possibly do is learn Torah in an incorrect manner, because it gives you a real sense of inflated self-importance. And therefore the Tanya was the antidote. The Alter Rebbe wrote a sefer called the Tanya to give humility specifically to Talmidei Chachamim. That's what the Tanya is for. It's to break the arrogance, and we know that's what the Baal Shem Tov's whole work was, right? That he came into a world where the scholars of our people had come to a point of like absolute rejection of the simpletons, like you're saying, this division between Chiloni and they weren't even Chiloni, they were just not educated scholars, right? They were simple good Jews, and there had become this like massive divide of hatred and total, demeaning of the simple Jews before the Baal Shem Tov came in the world. That was his whole thing. He came with this banner of love your fellow, and he brought close the simpletons, and he used to gather huge groups of simple Jews and speak to them and raise them up. And that was the Baal Shem Tov's thing. The Alter Rebbe sort of like codified that by giving the antidote to the arrogance of the Talmud scholar. And he called it the Tanya because that's the name of the snake. And it's not accidental. It happens to also be the name of how you introduce a Tanaic statement, because it's those Tanaic statements which could be the snake if approached improperly.
And that snake is different from other snakes.
It's a unique type of klippa because of the level of arrogance that can sneak in to a person who's really reaching great heights in themselves, right? It's the snake is arrogance, period. It's just like, where do you see the snake in full-blown glory? You'd think it was some rotten guy sitting on street corners ripping people off. It's not. The place you find real and true and intense arrogance is in the middle of the holy of holies sometimes, right? It's right, gets mixed. That's what he's about to say in the next chapter. The greatest source of this evil is with religious Jews, because they have something to be proud about. And unfortunately they know it, and that makes them into the worst type of klippa that you could meet. You need a Tanya to combat that. Anyway, thank God we have it. Because of his self-importance, he doesn't give place to the other person. Who is this guy? He doesn't even know Aleph Beis. He's nothing. I hate him. He should not exist. But that's actually for the simpleton. What about the other scholar in the room? That's where the real hatred starts to get going, because the other person who's a scholar in the room, he actually does so to speak, minimize my greatness. Because if you know something and you're going to sort of be like the number one scholar, where does that leave me? And therefore, it's specifically when another person has some good qualities, that's when it triggers my need to undo him. Because it seemingly reduces my yeshus, my standing. So that's why I can't stand it. So there is actually, as it comes out, a reason for sinas chinam, for baseless hatred. The reality is because of your own arrogance. It's because of you that the opponent becomes an opponent, not because of the opponent. He doesn't oppose you because he came against you in anything. Just that he is. The possession so the very fact that he holds up a place, that means I can't take that place. And therefore I'm limited. Because again, remember the cause of this thing, the finite attributes were tinged with an infinity, and Chesed wanted to be everywhere. So there's no room for even the smallest spot of an opposing characteristic. It makes me smaller, right? And therefore the existence of anyone, especially anyone who actually is holding by a particular level of importance, he automatically removes my importance. And therefore I'm opposed to him. That's why we call it baseless, because he didn't do anything except be. And you can't handle him. Whereas in the Sitra de Kedusha, on the side of holiness, the Ikaru Bittul, what do we say holiness is all about? It's the opposite of that snake, right? Which is also why it's messianic, right? In a certain sense, when you get the snake under control, there's nothing wrong with dominating the whole world if you're Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the king of the whole world, and he knew it, and he wasn't ashamed of it, because he knew it wasn't him that was the king of the whole world. He realized that whatever he had was not his own, it was Elokus, it was godliness. So if you're able to really recognize your true place, that you're only feeling this level of infinity streaming through you because it's God that's infinite, and he's the one streaming through you, and you are not there. At best, you're just sort of like a placeholder allowing God's light to shine in. That's called bittul. Self-effacement, removing your own feeling of existence. That is the definition of holiness, right? That's what a mitzvah basically is, that when you're doing a mitzvah, it's not you doing the mitzvah. It's you getting out of Hashem's way so Hashem can perform a mitzvah in this world. His will suddenly comes streaming through when you remove your will and allow something. You didn't make up the mitzvahs. Why are you putting on these straps of leather on your body? That was not a man-made idea. And so when you just remove yourself and allow your body to conform to this higher level of reality, you are essentially removing your will from the table, and that allows Hashem's will to shine through. And all of a sudden, you're like a beam of light of godliness in this world, breaking through the snakeskin. And this also enables you to unite with others. Because when you're not all of a sudden taking up space, then another person also doesn't take up space. They're not taking up your space because you don't have any space to take up. So when you have a bittul and you want to remove your own sense of self-importance, you automatically suddenly can bond with everything and everyone, every being around you. They're no longer in opposition to you. On the contrary, they actually support you. Because you're holding in a state of self-effacement, suddenly you have room to give place to another person. Look at Moshe Rabbeinu, look at the Rebbe, right? He was the most important person in the world, and what was he busy with? Making sure that everybody else felt that they were the most important person in the world. And there's not a person, a Jew, a non-Jew, I would imagine even an animal, literally, that came into the Rebbe's presence that didn't suddenly feel like they were like really the number one person in creation. Because his whole business was to get out of the way. So there wasn't someone else in the room with you. They were a negation, and therefore they made you feel like you filled the whole room. So when you are in a state of bittul, not only does any other existence not oppose you, you promote their existence. The Rebbe made leaders out of everybody. He made them feel they were the most important person in the world. Someone was just telling me, I forget who it was, but he said he had the schus of meeting like a lot of tzaddikim in his life. Oh yeah, he spoke at the Gimel Tammuz Verbring, and it was like this Moroccan Yid, and he had Baruch Hashem come across like many great holy leaders in his life. And he said every time he came across one of these persons, he could tell like that, just in their eyes, the smell, like the whole room changed. And he said, in each one of them, that he just got into their presence, he felt like mamish, like he didn't even exist. There was such a towering presence. And he said, the big difference when I came into the room with the Rebbe, he felt like he was the only thing that existed, right? In other words, a great man can make you feel like you're small. But a really great man who's like basically not even there, he makes you feel like you're the only thing that matters in the world. The whole world is on your shoulders. You have the mission of conquering the entire planet Earth for God. You're suddenly very self-important because he doesn't take up place. So your existence does not bother him. And you feel that. It's actually one of the only places, like safe places in the world, because no matter who else you're with, if it's not the Rebbe, a little existence of someone who is non-existent, there's always going to be like a little bit of tinging of like, hey, who's taking up the room over here? Even if he's your teacher and your father and your counselor and your guide, he's not a Rebbe. So he has some level of self that he's bringing into the conversation. You're going to try and get, so to speak, clean advice from a person. You're never going to get real clean, crisp advice from anybody because they always are in the story too. It's always in some way like they're sizing up what your relationship is. What are you going to think of me if I say this? Like they exist and there's nothing they can do about it except for the Rebbe. When you go into the room with the Rebbe, there's only you in the room. You and God. Right? And so therefore, that's why people just lined up around the block literally day after day after day just to get a glimpse of this guy because it's the only person you could actually feel safe with because there wasn't someone else challenging your existence, even in the most subtle way, even if he was a big rabbi and if he was there to help you ostensibly. He can't help himself. He's there. It's not a simple thing to be bittul. This that you give place to another person, that you accept him and therefore you can unite with him. So it comes out in the Sitra Achra on the other side, the dark side, Mitzada Yeshus, because of a person's sense of self. You don't give place for another person. On the contrary, you oppose him in the very fact that he exists. You can't give him any space, and his existence causes hatred from within you. And that's the reason for pirud of separation, that you can't handle him. We're in the Sitra de Kedusha, on the side of holiness, because you are a non-existent entity. You find that Moshe Rabbeinu in yourself to some level. Therefore, someone else's existence does not bother you. And you give them room specifically. You make them feel important. And you accept them. And therefore, you can unite with them. All right, it's a little early, but I think we're going to hold here just for